The moment Marcus Chen's fingers wrapped around Maya's wrist and yanked her toward the front door of their modest apartment, she felt something inside her shatter, not her spirit, but the carefully constructed illusion she had maintained for 3 long years. "Get out," he snarled, his face twisted with contempt as rain pelted the windows behind them. "I'm done pretending you're enough for me. Victoria is everything you'll never be, beautiful, successful, worthy of standing beside me." What Marcus didn't know, what no one in this city knew, was that the woman he was discarding like garbage onto the cold concrete steps was Maya Elizabeth Thornton, the hidden heiress to the $47 billion Thornton global empire, and the daughter of the most powerful man on the eastern seaboard. Maya, 27 years old with warm bronze skin and dark curly hair now plastered to her face by the driving rain, looked up at her husband of 3 years with eyes that held not the tears he expected, but something far more unsettling, quiet recognition that this moment would change everything forever. She was still wearing her simple nursing scrubs, pale blue and now soaked through, the wedding ring she had cherished catching the streetlight as Marcus threw her single suitcase after her. The stakes were immeasurable, her heart, her dignity, her belief that love could exist without the corruption of wealth, and most devastatingly, the tiny secret growing inside her that she had planned to share with him tonight over the special dinner now burning forgotten on the stove. The question that would haunt every moment forward burned in the cold night air. When Marcus Chen discovered the true identity of the woman he had just destroyed, would the revelation save them, or would it ignite a war that would consume them both? 3 years earlier, Maya Thornton had made a decision that sent shockwaves through Manhattan's elite circles. She disappeared. At 24, she had grown exhausted by the parade of suitors who saw only dollar signs in her eyes, by the superficial friendships that evaporated the moment she questioned their sincerity, and by the suffocating weight of being the Thornton heiress, rather than simply Maya. Her father, Richard Thornton, a distinguished man of 62 with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that belied his ruthless business reputation, had reluctantly agreed to her plan. She would move to Seattle, work as a nurse under her mother's maiden name, and live the anonymous life she craved. "Find yourself, sweetheart," he had said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Find someone who loves Maya, not the Thornton fortune. But remember, I'm always watching over you." She had found Marcus Chen in the emergency room on a rainy Tuesday night, his arm requiring stitches after a construction accident. He was 29 then, with jet black hair, sharp features, and an ambition that burned in his dark eyes. He was handsome in an intense way, tall and lean with golden-tanned skin and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. His construction company was small but growing, and he spoke of his dreams with such passion that Maya found herself captivated. He didn't know her father's name. He didn't care about her non-existent designer wardrobe. He brought her wildflowers he'd picked from an empty lot and wrote her poetry on napkins during their coffee dates. For the first time in her life, Maya felt truly seen, not as an asset to be acquired, but as a woman to be cherished. Their wedding was small, a courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses from the hospital where Maya worked. She wore a simple white sundress, her curly hair loose around her shoulders, and Marcus had looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I don't have much to offer you," he had said, sliding the modest ring onto her finger, "but everything I have, everything I am, everything I will become, it's all yours, Maya. Forever." She had believed him. She had believed every word. The first year was beautiful in its simplicity. They lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture and dreams they built together every night over inexpensive dinners. Marcus worked 18-hour days growing his company, and Maya took extra shifts at the hospital to help with expenses. They fell asleep tangled together, exhausted but content, and Maya often thought that this struggle, this authenticity, this pure love, was worth more than every penny of her hidden inheritance. She sent coded updates to her father through a secure app, assuring him she was happy, genuinely happy, and Richard Thornton waited and watched and hoped his daughter had finally found what she was looking for. But empires are built on shifting sands, and ambition is a hunger that often consumes what it once protected. In their second year of marriage, Marcus's construction company landed its first major contract, a development project that would put him on the map. The money started flowing, and with it came new people, new circles, new temptations. Marcus began coming home later, smelling of expensive cologne he hadn't bought and speaking of investors and partners Maya had never met. She told herself it was normal, that success required sacrifice, that the man who had written her poetry on napkins was still there beneath the Italian suits he now wore. She was wrong. Victoria Ashford entered their lives like poison disguised as perfume. She was 31, tall and willowy with porcelain skin and platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect sheets down her back. She was the daughter of Harrison Ashford, Marcus's biggest investor, and she made no secret of her interest in the ambitious young contractor. "Your wife seems simple," Victoria had said at the company Christmas party, looking Maya up and down with ice-blue eyes that missed nothing and valued less. Maya, in her modest blue dress from the clearance rack, had simply smiled. She had spent her entire childhood surrounded by women like Victoria, women who weaponized beauty and status, who saw kindness as weakness and authenticity as poverty. She knew this species well, and she refused to let them diminish her. But Marcus saw something different when he looked at Victoria. He saw doors opening, opportunities multiplying, a future grander than anything he had imagined. And slowly, like a thief stealing pennies before taking the gold, Victoria stole Maya's husband piece by piece. First it was the late meetings. Then the business trips. Then the credit card charges for jewelry Maya never received and restaurants she never visited. Maya found the texts on an ordinary Wednesday evening, Victoria's name followed by words no wife should ever read, promises that shattered the foundation of everything Maya had built her new life upon. When she confronted him, Marcus didn't even have the decency to lie. "Victoria understands the world I'm moving into," he said coldly, as if explaining a simple business decision. "She knows the right people, says the right things. She elevates me. What do you do, Maya? You come home smelling like hospital antiseptic and ask me about my day like we're still living in that tiny apartment counting pennies." His words struck like physical blows, each one calculated to wound. "I've outgrown you. I've outgrown this. Victoria's father is about to make me a partner in a deal worth $30 million. What has your family ever given me? Nothing. You have nothing." Maya stood very still, her hands trembling at her sides. She could have told him then. She could have revealed that the nothing she had was actually everything, that her family's $30 million was pocket change, that one phone call to her father could reduce Marcus and his precious investors to financial rubble. But she didn't. Because if she did, she would never know if his love could be real again. She would never know if Marcus Chen, the man who wrote poetry on napkins, still existed somewhere beneath this stranger's cruel ambition. "I'm pregnant," she whispered instead, offering him the truth she had planned to share over candlelight and hope. "Marcus, we're going to have a baby." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 heartbeats. Then Marcus laughed, a sound so cold it froze the remaining warmth in Maya's chest. "Perfect timing," he said, reaching for his coat. "Another complication. Another anchor dragging me down." He walked to the door without looking back. "Figure it out, Maya. I have a dinner meeting with Victoria." The door slammed behind him, and Maya sank to the floor, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach, and for the first time since leaving her father's mansion, she let herself weep. The next 3 weeks existed in a gray haze of survival. Marcus barely came home, and when he did, he looked through Maya like she was furniture, useful once, now simply in the way. She continued working her shifts at the hospital, hiding her pregnancy and her heartbreak behind professional smiles, and she began making plans. Not for revenge, Maya had never possessed that particular hunger, but for protection. Her child would not be raised in a home poisoned by contempt. Her child would know love, real love, even if its father proved incapable of providing it. She started looking for apartments, calculating how far her nursing salary would stretch, preparing to start over once again. But Marcus was impatient, and Victoria was hungry. The night of the dinner party was supposed to be Marcus's coronation, his official introduction to the elite circles Victoria had promised to open for him. He had demanded Maya attend, wanting to present the image of stability before divorcing her quietly and installing Victoria in her place. Maya had agreed because she wanted to see this world he had sold his soul to enter, this glittering cage he found more valuable than her love. She wore a simple emerald dress that brought out the warmth in her bronze skin, her curly hair pinned up elegantly, and she held her head high as they entered the Ashford mansion. The evening was a masterpiece of humiliation. Victoria clung to Marcus openly, introducing him to powerful guests while Maya stood alone by the windows, invisible and ignored. Harrison Ashford, Victoria's father, a heavy man with calculating eyes and a politician's smile, looked at Maya with the dismissive glance reserved for servants who had wandered into the wrong room. "Your wife seems uncomfortable," he commented to Marcus, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Perhaps these gatherings aren't suited to her background." Laughter rippled through the group, and Marcus joined it, his eyes meeting Maya's with a message clear as broken glass: "Know your place." It was Victoria who delivered the final blow. Halfway through dinner, she rose with her champagne glass and clinked it for attention. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the grand dining room. "And I want to especially thank Marcus Chen, who has shown me what true partnership looks like, in business and in life." She turned to look directly at Maya, triumph glittering in her ice-blue eyes. "Some women are meant to be wives. Others are meant to be queens. Tonight, we celebrate the difference." The guests applauded, not understanding the cruelty beneath the words, and Marcus beamed at Victoria like she had handed him the world. Maya set down her napkin with hands that didn't tremble, though her heart was cracking, and stood. "Congratulations," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus. I hope it's worth what you're losing." Then she walked out of the Ashford mansion with her dignity intact, into the rain that had begun to fall, and she didn't look back. But what Maya didn't see, what no one in that glittering room knew, was that her photograph had been captured by a society photographer the moment she entered the party. And by morning, that photograph would reach the desk of someone who had been searching for her for 3 long years. The dominoes were beginning to fall, and when they finished falling, nothing in Marcus Chen's carefully constructed world would remain standing. First major cliffhanger ***. Marcus came home at midnight to find Maya packing the few possessions she truly valued, her nursing textbooks, the photographs of her late mother, the napkin with the first poem he had ever written her. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, still wearing his dinner jacket, still smelling of Victoria's perfume. "Leaving," Maya said simply. "You made your choice clear tonight, Marcus. I won't stay where I'm not wanted." Something ugly twisted across his handsome features, not regret, but wounded pride. "You don't get to leave me," he snarled, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. "You don't get to walk away and make me look like the villain. Victoria's father has already hinted at the partnership, everything I've worked for is finally happening. And you're going to stay, smile, and play the supportive wife until I decide how to handle this divorce quietly." "I'm pregnant," Maya repeated, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. "Your child is growing inside me, and you want me to play act while you parade your mistress in public?" Marcus's face contorted with rage and something else, fear, perhaps, that this complication could derail his perfect plans. "Get rid of it," he spat. "I'll pay for everything. Then we can discuss terms." The slap came before Maya realized she had moved, her palm connecting with his cheek with a crack that echoed through the apartment. "Don't you ever," she breathed, her whole body shaking now, "suggest that again. This is my child. This is your child. And no amount of money or ambition gives you the right to." His hands were around her arms, too tight, and he was dragging her toward the door before she could finish. "Get out," he shouted, wrenching the door open as the rain poured down in sheets beyond the threshold. "Get out of my house, get out of my life, take your pregnancy and your judgment and your nothing and get out." He threw her suitcase after her, the contents spilling across the wet concrete, and slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. Maya lay on the cold steps, rain soaking through her emerald dress, one hand still pressed against her stomach, and she let herself feel, for just one moment, the full weight of her shattered dreams. Then she gathered her scattered belongings, rose to her feet, and walked into the night. She didn't see the black sedan parked across the street, or the suited man inside who was already making a phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Thornton," the man said, his voice tight with urgency. "We've found her. But sir, there's a situation. She needs you. She needs you now." 3 days later, Marcus Chen was on top of the world. Victoria had moved into the apartment that still smelled faintly of Maya's jasmine perfume, replacing every trace of his former wife with designer touches and expensive art. Harrison Ashford had officially announced the partnership, and Marcus's phone hadn't stopped ringing with congratulations from people who had never given him the time of day before. He had everything he had ever wanted, the money, the status, the beautiful woman on his arm, the future unlimited. If he occasionally woke at 3 a.m. reaching for a warm body that wasn't there, if he sometimes caught himself listening for the sound of Maya's gentle humming in the kitchen, he buried those weaknesses deep and reminded himself of what he had gained. Maya Chen had been a lesson in settling for less. Victoria Ashford was his reward for dreaming bigger. The invitation to the Thornton Global Centennial Gala arrived on a silver tray, delivered by a courier in full livery. Marcus stared at the heavy cardstock, his heart pounding. Thornton Global was the holy grail, a conglomerate so vast it made Harrison Ashford's fortune look like pocket change. The Thornton family was notoriously private, famously exclusive, and absolutely legendary in business circles. An invitation to their gala was worth more than gold. It was a key to a kingdom Marcus had never dared to dream he could enter. "Victoria," he called out, his voice cracking with excitement. "Victoria." She appeared in the doorway, perfectly made up despite the early hour, and her ice-blue eyes went wide when she saw the invitation. "That's impossible," she breathed, snatching it from his hands. "My father has been trying to get invited to a Thornton event for 15 years. How did you? Does it matter?" Marcus laughed, spinning her around the room. "We're in, Victoria. We're finally in the circles that matter." Neither of them noticed the small notation at the bottom of the invitation, written in elegant script: "Mr. Chen's attendance is specifically requested by the Thornton family. Formal attire required. No substitutions permitted for the guest of honor's attendance." Guest of honor. Marcus assumed it was his new partnership with Ashford that had caught the Thorntons' attention. He assumed his star was rising so fast that even the untouchable elite had to take notice. He strutted into his office that morning feeling invincible, already planning how to leverage this connection into even greater heights. He had no idea that in a penthouse 60 floors above the city, a man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that had gone cold as winter was making plans of his own. Maya had cried for one night. 24 hours of grief, of loss, of mourning the love she had believed was real and the life she had tried so desperately to build. Then she had dried her tears, squared her shoulders, and made a phone call she had avoided for 3 years. "Daddy," she said when Richard Thornton answered, and the sound of her voice broke something in the powerful man's heart. "I'm ready to come home." He sent the private jet within the hour. The Thornton family estate in Connecticut was exactly as Maya remembered, a sprawling mansion that somehow managed to feel like home despite its grandeur. Her childhood bedroom had been kept exactly as she left it, fresh flowers on the nightstand, her books still lined up on the shelves. She stood in the doorway, one hand on her stomach, and let herself feel safe for the first time in weeks. Richard Thornton held his daughter for a long time, saying nothing, letting her feel the steady beat of his heart against her ear. When she finally pulled back, he cupped her face in his hands and studied her with eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "And then we will decide together what comes next." So Maya told him. She told him about Marcus's kindness that had slowly curdled into contempt. She told him about Victoria's calculated cruelty. She told him about the pregnancy, the rejection, the rain-soaked night when her husband had thrown her away like garbage. She told him everything, and Richard Thornton listened without interruption, his face carved from stone, only his eyes betraying the fury building beneath his calm exterior. "He didn't know who you were," Richard said when she finished, a statement rather than a question. "No. I never told him. I wanted." Maya's voice cracked. "I wanted to be loved for me, Daddy. Just me. Was that so foolish?" "No, sweetheart." Richard pulled her close again. "That was brave. That was my strong, beautiful, trusting daughter trying to find something real in a world of illusions." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But now it's time for illusions to end. For everyone." Maya pulled back, searching her father's face. "What are you planning?" Richard Thornton smiled, and there was nothing kind in it. "A gala, of course. To introduce my daughter to society once more. And to show a certain ambitious young man exactly what he threw away. Dad, I don't want revenge. I just want to move on. I want to focus on my baby, on building a new life." "And you will," Richard promised. "But first, Marcus Chen needs to understand. Not to punish him, though that would certainly be satisfying. But because men like him will always chase power, always climb over others to reach the top. If he never faces consequences, he'll never change. And more importantly." He lifted Maya's chin, his eyes fierce with protective love. "The world needs to see that my daughter bows to an 01. That she walked through fire and emerged unbroken. That the woman he discarded is a queen who chose to live simply, not a peasant who was lucky to catch his eye. Let him see you, Maya. Let him see exactly what he lost. And then walk away with your head high, and never look back." Maya thought about it for a long moment. She thought about the rain on her face, the sound of her suitcase hitting concrete, the cold dismissal in Marcus's eyes when she told him about their child. She thought about all the times she had made herself small, all the times she had accepted less than she deserved in the name of proving that love could exist without wealth. "Okay," she said finally. "But on one condition." "Name it." "After this, I'm done hiding. I want to work again, really work, not just appear at charity functions. I want to go back to nursing, to use my medical degree. I want my child to see me building something real, not just inheriting something given." Richard's smile softened into genuine warmth. "That's my girl. Now, let's discuss your dress for the gala. I'm thinking we call in Valentino." The night of the Thornton Centennial Gala arrived with all the pageantry of a coronation. Limousines lined up for blocks, their occupants representing the most powerful families in the hemisphere. The venue, a historic ballroom transformed into a garden of light, sparkled with crystal chandeliers and cascading flowers. String quartets played softly, champagne flowed freely, and everywhere you looked, power in its purest form walked arm in arm with beauty and prestige. Marcus Chen arrived feeling like a king entering his rightful domain. He wore his finest tuxedo, Victoria Ashford stunning beside him in a white gown that caught every light. Her father Harrison was there too, already working the room, but tonight was Marcus's moment. Tonight was the night his transformation from struggling contractor to elite power player would be complete. "Remember," Victoria whispered as they ascended the grand staircase, "these people can smell desperation. Be confident, but not aggressive. Let them come to you." "I know what I'm doing," Marcus replied, though his palms were slightly damp. The crowd seemed to part before him, whispers following in his wake, and he stood a little taller. This was where he belonged. This was the life he deserved. Harrison Ashford approached with champagne, his politician's smile firmly in place. "The Thorntons usually keep their events family only," he said quietly to Marcus. "The fact that they invited you specifically, there must be something at play. Be careful. Be observant. And for God's sake, be charming. I'm always charming, Marcus said with a confidence he almost felt. The orchestra suddenly swelled, the lights dimming slightly, and a hush fell over the glittering crowd. A spotlight appeared at the top of the grand staircase, and Marcus heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath beside him. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced a voice that carried to every corner of the vast room, "Richard Thornton welcomes you to the Centennial Gala. And now, please welcome the light of his life, his beloved daughter, returned to us after 3 years. Miss Maya Elizabeth Thornton." The name registered. The spotlight illuminated the figure at the top of the stairs. And Marcus Chen felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Second major cliffhanger. It was Maya. His Maya. His wife Maya. But transformed in ways that made his mind stutter and fail. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that cascaded like water, cinched at her slender waist and flowing into a train that whispered against the marble stairs as she descended. Her bronze skin glowed against the fabric, her dark curly hair was swept up in an elegant arrangement that exposed the graceful line of her neck, and diamonds, real diamonds, the kind that cost more than Marcus's entire company, sparkled at her ears and throat. She was beautiful. She had always been beautiful. But tonight, she was radiant with a power and presence that Marcus had never seen in the woman who came home smelling of hospital antiseptic. She was Richard Thornton's daughter. She was the Thornton heiress. She was worth billions. And he had thrown her out in the rain. Victoria's nails dug into his arm. "That's impossible," she hissed. "That can't be, she was a nurse. She lived in that horrible little apartment. She had nothing." "She had everything," Marcus heard himself say, his voice hollow. "She had everything, and she chose him. She chose poverty and struggle and a small life with him over mansions and private jets and unlimited wealth. She chose to be loved for herself, and he had called her nothing. He had told her she dragged him down. He had thrown away the most precious thing he would ever hold in his hands, and he had done it because he was too blind, too stupid, too consumed by greed to see what was right in front of him. Maya reached the bottom of the staircase, and the crowd erupted in applause. She smiled graciously, accepting air kisses from society matrons and firm handshakes from titans of industry, and through it all, she didn't look at him once. Not a glance. Not a hint that she knew he existed. It was the most devastating cut of all. Richard Thornton appeared at his daughter's side, and when his eyes found Marcus in the crowd, they were chips of Arctic ice. "Enjoy the party, Mr. Chen," the older man said, his voice carrying just far enough. "I do hope the evening provides perspective." Then they were swept away by the crowd, and Marcus stood frozen in his finest tuxedo, surrounded by wealth he would never touch, watching his discarded wife float through a world where she had always belonged, while he remained exactly what he had always been beneath the ambition and the Italian suits. Nothing. Harrison Ashford appeared at his elbow, his face gray with horror. "You married Richard Thornton's daughter," he whispered urgently. "You married her and divorced her and," he broke off, visibly calculating the devastation about to rain down on his own empire. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Richard Thornton doesn't just destroy his enemies. He erases them. He makes it so they never existed at all." "I didn't know," Marcus said numbly. "She never told me. She never. She shouldn't have had to tell you." Harrison's whisper had become a hiss. "You should have valued her for who she was, not what you thought she was worth. You fool. You absolute fool." Victoria was pulling at his arm, trying to escape before their social destruction became complete, but Marcus couldn't move. Couldn't look away from Maya, laughing at something an ambassador was saying, her hand resting lightly on her stomach in a gesture that made his heart seize. His child. His child was the heir to the Thornton Empire. And he had told her to get rid of it. The room began to spin, and Marcus Chen finally understood the full scope of the hell he had created for himself. The next hour was a masterclass in social devastation. Without saying a single negative word about Marcus, Richard Thornton systematically dismantled every connection, every partnership, every dream the ambitious young contractor had spent years building. Conversations stopped when Marcus approached. Investors who had praised him last week suddenly couldn't recall his name. Harrison Ashford was photographed in tense discussion with Richard Thornton, and by the end of that conversation, the older man's face had gone from gray to ashen. The partnership that Marcus had sold his soul for was gone, evaporated like morning mist. Victoria abandoned him halfway through the evening, her survival instincts finally overriding her pride. Marcus watched her slip away on the arm of another wealthy suitor, not even bothering to look back, and he felt nothing. She had never wanted him, only his trajectory, his potential, his usefulness. And now that he was socially radioactive, she couldn't distance herself fast enough. He was alone in a crowded room, surrounded by luxury he could no longer access, destroyed so completely that he couldn't even summon the energy for anger. "You're still here." Maya's voice, behind him. He turned slowly, afraid to hope, and found her standing alone in an alcove away from the crowd. Up close, she was even more beautiful, but her eyes held something unexpected, not triumph, not vengeance, but sadness. "Maya." His voice cracked on her name. I didn't know." "I know you didn't." She studied him with those warm brown eyes he had once written poetry about. "That was the point, Marcus. I wanted to know if you could love me without the money. Without the name. Without all the things that made everyone else want to possess me. I did love you." The words tore from him, raw and desperate. "In the beginning, I loved you so much it terrified me. You were the best thing that had ever happened to me. But not better than the things you thought you wanted." Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "I watched you change, Marcus. I watched the man who wrote me poetry become the man who called me nothing. I watched you choose ambition over our marriage, over our child, over everything we had built together. And the worst part?" She stepped closer, and he could smell her perfume, jasmine, the same as always. "You made that choice believing I was powerless. You treated me that way because you thought you could. Because you thought I had nowhere else to go. I was wrong." He was shaking now, 3 years of suppressed emotion cracking through the walls he had built. "I was so wrong, Maya. I looked at what I could gain and forgot to see what I already had. I threw away the only real thing in my life because I was too blind to recognize its worth." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "You did. Can you?" He reached for her hand, then stopped himself. "Can you ever forgive me?" Maya was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was heavy with a grief that matched his own. "I want to, Marcus. Part of me will always be the girl who fell in love with you in that emergency room, who believed in the future you painted with words on napkins. But too much has happened. Too much has been broken." She touched her stomach gently. "I have someone else to think about now. Someone who needs a mother who values herself enough to not accept crumbs from someone else's table." "I could be better," Marcus said desperately. "I could change. Maya, please, give me another chance. Not for the money, not for any of this, I don't care about any of it anymore. I just want you. I just want our family." Do you know what the saddest part is? Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I believe you mean that right now. But I also believed you when you said everything you had was mine. I believed you when you promised forever. And then I watched you break every promise you made because something shinier caught your attention." She stepped back, creating distance between them. "I won't let my child watch that happen. I won't let them learn that love is conditional, that people are disposable, that vows can be discarded when they become inconvenient." "So this is it?" Marcus's voice broke completely. "There's nothing I can do? Nothing I can say?" Maya looked at him for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft with a compassion he didn't deserve. "There's something you can do, Marcus. Not for me, for yourself. Go home tonight and look in the mirror. Look at the man you've become and ask yourself if he's the man you wanted to be. Ask yourself if your parents would be proud of him, if your 10-year-old self would recognize him, if there's anything left of the person who found beauty in wildflowers from empty lots." She reached up and touched his cheek, just once, a ghost of the intimacy they had shared. "Then decide if you want to stay that man, or if you're willing to do the work to become someone different. Not for me. Not to win me back. But because you deserve to be someone you can respect." She turned to walk away, and Marcus grabbed her arm, gently this time, desperately. "Maya, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know I can't fix it with words, but please, let me be part of our child's life. Let me try to be the father they deserve, even if I can't be the husband you needed." Maya paused, considering. The orchestra played something soft and melancholy in the distance, and the glittering crowd continued their dance, oblivious to the quiet devastation occurring in this shadowed alcove. "My father wants to destroy you," she said finally. "I asked him not to. I asked him to give you a chance to prove that you can grow, that the man I fell in love with still exists somewhere inside you." She turned to face him one last time. "I'll be in Seattle next month for a medical conference. If you want to see me, to talk about the baby, about co-parenting, about what the future might look like, I'll be there." "But Marcus?" "Yes? Come as the man who wrote poetry on napkins. Leave the Italian suits and the ambition and the need to impress behind. If you can do that, if you can remember who you were before you got lost, then maybe we can build something new. Not what we had. That's gone forever. But something different. Something honest." She walked away without looking back, disappearing into the crowd of glittering socialites and power brokers, and Marcus was left alone with the ruins of everything he had built and destroyed. 2 months later, on a crisp Seattle morning, Maya sat in a coffee shop near the hospital where she had once worked, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a soft sweater that accommodated her growing belly, and her curly hair was loose around her shoulders. No diamonds. No designer labels. Just Maya, waiting to see if the father of her child could find his way back to humanity. She wasn't sure what she hoped for. The pain of his betrayal was still fresh, a wound that ached when she moved too quickly. But she also remembered the good times, the laughter, the passion, the way he used to look at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. People could change. She had seen it happen in the hospital, witnessed transformations brought about by crisis and love and the simple, brutal honesty of mortality. Maybe Marcus could change too. Or maybe he would walk through that door with the same hunger in his eyes, seeing only the Thornton fortune and the access she represented, and she would have her final answer. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up. Marcus Chen stood in the doorway, and for a moment, she almost didn't recognize him. The Italian suits were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a worn sweater. He looked thinner, as if the past 2 months had carved away everything that wasn't essential. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and there was a vulnerability in his expression that she had never seen before. In his hands, he held a single wildflower, purple and delicate, clearly picked from somewhere nearby. And tucked under his arm was a napkin, a restaurant napkin, with writing visible even from across the room. Maya felt her heart stutter and stop. He crossed the coffee shop slowly, as if approaching something precious that might spook and flee. When he reached her table, he didn't sit. Just stood there, holding his offerings like a supplicant before a throne. "I spent 2 months thinking about what you said," he said quietly. "About looking in the mirror. About asking myself who I wanted to be." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't like the answers I found, Maya. I had become everything I used to despise, hollow, grasping, measuring people by their usefulness. I lost myself so completely that I couldn't even see the treasure right in front of me. He set the wildflower on the table between them. I picked this from the lot next to my first construction site. The company's gone now, I sold it, paid off my debts, started over from nothing. I'm working with my hands again, on a crew, earning just enough to cover a small apartment. A sad smile touched his lips. Turns out, I'm happier covered in sawdust than I ever was in a suit. He held out the napkin, and Maya took it with trembling fingers. In his familiar handwriting, she read, "I have been a fool, chasing gold while holding diamonds. I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway, not for us, but for the life we created. I will never be able to give our child wealth or status or power. But I can give them a father who finally understands what matters. Please let me try." Maya looked up at him, this broken man who had once been her everything, and she felt the last of her anger melt into something else, not love, not yet, but possibility. "Sit down," she said softly. "Let's talk." The conversation lasted hours, spilling from the coffee shop into a walk along the waterfront, continuing over lunch and into the afternoon. Marcus told her about the aftermath of the gala, the business collapse, the isolation, the long dark nights when he confronted every terrible choice he had ever made. He told her about the work he had done on himself, the therapy sessions, the slow painful process of peeling away the ambition that had suffocated his soul. "I kept the napkins," he admitted as they sat on a bench overlooking the harbor. "Every poem I ever wrote you, every note, every promise. I read them every day to remind myself of who I used to be. And I realized something." He turned to face her, his dark eyes raw with honesty. "I was happiest when I had nothing. When we had nothing. The struggle didn't drain me, it fed me. It was only when I started succeeding that I started failing as a human being." Maya listened, and she heard something in his voice that she had desperately missed: authenticity. This wasn't performance or manipulation. This was Marcus Chen stripped down to his foundations, trying to rebuild himself from the rubble of his mistakes. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "You hurt me in ways that might never fully heal. I know. And I won't pretend that we can go back to what we had. That relationship is over, Marcus. The people we were are gone. I know that too. But..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I want our child to know their father. I want them to see that people can make terrible mistakes and still find their way back to goodness. And I want..." Her voice softened. "I want to see who you become when you're not trying to impress anyone. When you're just Marcus, working with his hands and finding joy in simple things. Is that enough?" He asked, hope and fear warring in his expression. "Is there any chance that someday?" "I don't know." Maya placed her hand on his. "But I'm willing to find out." 6 months later, Maya gave birth to a daughter she named Hope, a beautiful baby with her mother's bronze skin and her father's dark, intense eyes. Marcus was there for every moment, not as a husband but as a partner, holding Maya's hand through the pain and crying when he first held his daughter in his arms. "I will spend the rest of my life earning her love," he whispered, looking down at Hope's tiny, perfect face. "And yours. However long it takes." True to his word, Marcus rebuilt his life one honest day at a time. He worked construction, came home covered in sawdust, and spent every moment he could with his daughter. He didn't ask for money or help from the Thornton family. He wanted to prove, to himself and to Maya, that he could stand on his own feet. Richard Thornton watched from a distance, skeptical at first but gradually warming as he saw the genuine transformation in the man who had once broken his daughter's heart. Maya went back to nursing, working at a children's hospital and coming home to share stories of small patients and tiny victories. She and Marcus existed in a careful, tender space, not quite reconciled, not quite separate, building something new from the ashes of what they had destroyed. And slowly, so slowly that neither of them could pinpoint when it happened, love began to grow again. Not the wild, consuming passion of their early days, this was something deeper, tested by fire and tempered by pain. Marcus would bring her wildflowers every week. Maya would find poems on napkins tucked into her lunchbox. They remembered how to laugh together, how to dream together, how to be partners instead of strangers. On Hope's first birthday, surrounded by family in Richard Thornton's estate, Marcus knelt before Maya with a ring that had cost him 3 months' salary, modest by Thornton standards, priceless by any measure of the heart. "I know I don't deserve another chance," he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "But you once asked me to come back as the man who wrote poetry on napkins, and I've been trying every day to be that person. I've learned that love isn't about what someone can give you, it's about who you become when you're with them. And when I'm with you, Maya, I'm the best version of myself. I'm the man I was always supposed to be." He held up the ring, simple and beautiful, catching the light. "Will you marry me again? Not the girl who hid her inheritance and the boy who lost his way, but the people we've become. The people who know how hard marriage is and choose it anyway." Maya looked at this man who had humiliated her, abandoned her, and then fought his way back from the darkness to deserve her love. She looked at their daughter, happy and whole, surrounded by a family that loved her. She looked at the future stretching out before them, not easy, never easy, but honest and true and built on a foundation that wouldn't crack. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Again. Forever. For real this time." Richard Thornton watched his daughter embrace the man who had once thrown her away like garbage, and he saw what he had always hoped for, not revenge, not destruction, but redemption. True love, tested and proven, rising from the ashes of a spectacular fall. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Hope was asleep in her nursery, Maya and Marcus stood on the terrace looking out at the stars. "I have a confession," Maya said softly. "What's that?" "I was going to tell you about my family. That first year, when things were still good, I almost told you 100 times." She leaned into him, feeling his arms wrap around her. "But I kept waiting for the right moment, and then, things changed." "I'm glad you didn't tell me," Marcus said quietly. "If I had known from the beginning, I would never have learned who I really was. I would never have hit rock bottom and been forced to rebuild. The pain was terrible, but it was necessary. It made me someone who deserves to be here, holding you." Maya turned in his arms, looking up at the face she had loved, hated, and learned to love again. "Do you know what I've learned through all of this? Tell me. That real love isn't about never falling. It's about getting up. It's about choosing each other, over and over again, even when it would be easier to walk away. It's about being brave enough to break and strong enough to heal." She reached up to touch his cheek. "You fell, Marcus. You fell hard and you broke things that mattered. But then you got up. You chose to become better. And that choice, that's what love actually looks like." He kissed her then, under the stars, with their daughter sleeping peacefully inside and a future full of possibility stretching out before them. They had traveled through fire and emerged transformed, two people who had lost everything and found what truly mattered in the wreckage. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of redemption, or made you believe in second chances, hit that like button and subscribe for more life-changing stories. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people, they're about imperfect people who choose, every single day, to become worthy of each other. And remember, your past does not define your future. No matter how far you've fallen, you can always choose to rise. Love will find you when you find yourself.